Good morning, everyone. I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you where I'm going with this next. Trying to show off the software, I had a chance to explore it. Like Wendy was saying, it's fairly new, and it was really kind of hard to come up with a really good search, if nothing else, on the internet to find out more about it, because Live unfortunately is kind of a generic name for live presentation, etc. Came up a million times over. The missing pieces that I for sure am going to want to cover this morning are what software is involved. So, what is the software we're looking at, add-in services? What's the workflow like? So I'm going to get into the workflow because that definitely was missing. I couldn't find that, at least here in October 2016 when we're doing this webcast. And then we're going to take a look at if there is no other software involved, that like Autodesk makes a lot of different products, and they also can feed into the end result of a live scene. And so if there's no other software involved, what happens right out of the box, right out of the gate? What's the easy stuff? And then we'll talk about how you can raise the bar with Stingray and 3ds Max, so on and so forth. So that's where I'm heading with this. Most of you, I imagine, already know about one of the elements of what Autodesk calls live design. So that was already part of the confusion for me when I first started exploring this, because the product and/or service that we're looking at is called Live, the Live Editor, the Live Viewer, and Autodesk is terming, at least here in October, Live Design, which is an encapsulation of several different packages working together in tandem with each other to make the experience even better for you. One of those four that they're at least highlighting right now under Live Design is Autodesk Revit. And so what you're going to be seeing with Autodesk Live is very Revit-centric, because it's Revit content that's being posted into Live. So that consequently it's aimed at the building industry. So it starts with Revit and a Revit project. You got to do the project anyway for your construction documents and the actual building itself. Why not be able to experience it in an immersive environment like Live? So it starts with that. The second one in the series that I'm going to highlight right now, which is the center of this universe for this webcast, is Autodesk Alive. And it's the tagline for it from Autodesk is Interactive Storytelling Engine for Architects. I also teach MEP, etc., and I of course see places for that as well, but it's pretty obvious with architects, interior design and the like, that they're going to be drawn to Live because of the materials, not just the exploration, but what do we think of the space? How big is that space? What does the owner think of that? How does the flow work? So on and so forth. You can really explore the space yourself. Okay, so what Autodesk considers to be Autodesk Live main business opportunities here for you is to make your Revit model interactive. It says in one click. It's actually a couple clicks, but pretty close to that. It actually was really pretty easy, and I'm going to show you the clicks as well. The second bullet there is actually multifaceted. We're talking about navigation points. In other words, it's the same sort of thing that you would set up camera views in a Revit project. This way you can have those be navigation points and just click, click, click your way through to different parts of the building. If you choose to toggle on a location in Revit, it'll pick up on that, and so you can do sun studies and shadow with geo-specific lighting. That's what they're talking about there. And then I'll show you render styles as well. Render styles, one of them is just like the model you would see. Let me just back up a slide here, like this, where the grass is green and the walls are white and brown, and there's some kind of a tile down below. But if you've ever got into a conversation with an owner or your client, and they get hung up on some kind of red brick that you chose, and during the meeting you've decided brown brick is the way to go, but they just can't get off the red brick. You've been there before, I know. You can turn that off, and then so that the materials, it all becomes white, and it's just about masses and the experiencing the space and the circulation through the space as well. So I'll show you what I'm talking about there. That's what they talk about with render styles. Present to clients and let them explore on their own. So that some of this is about exploring for yourself, making your way through your model, and making design decisions. Go back to the Revit model, make the changes, and see the experience within Autodesk Alive once again. But there is another software called Autodesk Alive Viewer, and that one's free, and you can publish out of the editor, which I'll be showing you both the editor and the viewer, so that if you give the file or post the file for the client, that they can do the walkthroughs themselves, and in very much like a game sort of an environment. Okay, so let me show you a little bit of what that looks like here. I'm going to jump over to, let's go to the live viewer here once. All right, so here's a Revit model brought into the live viewer. Let's see how well GoToMeeting keeps up with my orbits. A little choppy looking when I look over on the other screens, but it's smoother here on my end. I can orbit, get in closer to my scene, move around within the scene, just simply tap on the ground and I jump down to the scene. A little cursor follows around behind my arrow there to allow me to pick a place where I'd like to go to. And once I click, I don't have my hand on the mouse right now. It's just walking around within the scene. I see some place that I'd like to go. I click, take my hand off the cursor. It takes me to that location without even flying up there. Unless I want to fly up there, it'll make its way through into the hallways and the like. So I'm exploring the model, both the materials, the objects themselves. For example, I just clicked on a door. That one's a single flush, so on and so forth. Painted white. You know, this wall right here, it's a wall category. The wall does not wrap, so on and so forth. Okay, non-load bearing, etc. Okay, back to PowerPoint here once. So that's just a little bit of a taste of where we're heading with this, because that's Autodesk Live, but that was actually in the viewer there that we were looking at a project. Okay, so how do these things come together, right? There's three different things that are involved with this conversation. There's the Autodesk Live editor, the Autodesk Live viewer, and a Revit add-in. So the way they look, if I tab back to this once, this was the viewer, okay? So say that I go back to home here so you can see it. It has some controls that you'll see across the bottom. We can take a closer look at those later, and views that can be set up to jump myself from place to place, okay? Say that instead I want to go to the editor. So now I'm in the editor. It's a different project. I brought up school in this one, but very similar. So the controls are pretty similar between the two of them, except you have more control within the editor than you would within the viewer, and I'll sort those out for you. But this is the Revit project brought into the Autodesk Alive editor. And then in Revit, which probably almost everybody's familiar with, I'll give it just a second here to catch up refresh my screen because GoToMeeting is killing me. Okay, here's a second. Do that. Switching between GoToMeeting is killing me. Okay, hold on a second. In Revit, it'll be the same Revit that you're used to, with the exception that there's an add-in button that shows up within Revit. Here we go, it got it back again. So if I go to add-ins, there's one new button in here, Go Live, which is what's installed when I took out the subscription for a month to Live. It's installed that in Revit. Okay, so those are the three working together. So what's the difference between them here once? Let's take a look at that. If you look at the top part of my screen there on the left, this will let you know what is in both the live editor and the live viewer. Okay, so you can walk through your presentation and explore the model both inside and out. You can change the sun's position in both of them. You can query objects to see their BIM information. You saw me pick on a wall, on a door. That's what they're talking about there. And I can move between points of view. I just was clicking a couple places on the ground, but I'll show you in more depth what I'm talking about there. So both the editor and the viewer, those are capabilities. The live editor, Autodesk Alive editor, has additional capabilities. We can take via the add-in of Revit, I'll press the add-in and say I want to take my model and use it in the live editor. That pushes it up to a cloud service. It makes a project file out of it that can be used by the live editor and then downloads it back down to you. And when you open that up in the live editor, away you go with the things that I talked about up at the top of my screen there. I can add, delete, rename, and reorder points of view. That was the views are off to the right there, where I was like little thumbnails, if you will, places you can jump around within your model more readily. You can change the home view. You can't do that in the viewer. You can select the rendering style that the viewer will be working with, where things go to white, for example, and publish presentation views for live. So the format that live viewer needs, which is the .live file format, in Windows or on the iPad, can be published out of the editor. Okay, so what I did was yesterday I recorded the whole process end to end, because I didn't want to do that for you on the webcast here, because there's a couple of pauses where it gets processed and I don't want to be sitting around. We all got things to do. So I made a video out of that, and I'm going to bring that up right now and play it for you, but please be aware that I think the video looks like it runs for 6 minutes, and I'll talk through it as we go, but I think it took about 13 minutes to actually do this video end to end. So what I did was I just snipped out any little pieces where it was getting processed by the cloud, or I was downloading the file, that sort of a thing. Okay, so so you'll be able to see the steps without taking so long here. So it starts with a Revit project here. The camera views, like we're seeing here, view 1, view 2, 3D. I'm going to pause it for just a second. Those camera views become viewpoints later on. When I first was working with this project, I chose the school to work with. There must have been, okay, so literally 35 camera views in this project for one reason or another. Different classrooms, so on and so forth. I really didn't want that many points of view in there, so I just started deleting camera views left and right. to get it ready in a more palatable manner for use by the owner. Now that said, if you're deleting camera views and starting to tweak this into a presentation, you're probably going to want to make a copy of your Revit file. You're probably not going to want to just use the Revit file right out of production for this, but you absolutely can if you want to. Okay, but there's a couple of reasons why, and I'll try and pinpoint them as we go. So you can see here I set up 7 camera views, or save 7 camera views, and of course a 3D view. And just the regular floor plans and such like that. You see the Go Live button that I talked about. Let me pause again for just a moment here. When you hit Go Live, if there's anything that the live process sees that might be a problem, or you might want to think about before you pump it out to the cloud, it'll stop and ask you, think about this. For example, I'm in a fine detail. If I was in medium, it would say you might want to be in fine because it gives a higher level of detail. There's some CAD data in my model. It might not be able to process that. You sure you want to do this? And actually my little silhouette people are CAD people down there. If it can't process it, like I think there was a AutoCAD terrain, for example, in one of my models that I pumped up to the cloud, it just wasn't there when it came back down. The phase filter, I'm using phases in this project, and the furniture were in a different phase, and that was a good message for me because I looked at it and it said, hey, you might want to check this out. Additionally, look at the bottom there. It says extend terrain to horizon. All I have is just a cheesy chunk of a topo surface in there. It's not even like a really awesome terrain, with swales and whatever in it. You need at least a little bit of a Revit topo surface for that extend to horizon to work. So we'll take a closer look at what I'm talking about there. When I hit save and go, it does a 4-step process. First, it uploads the model. So it takes my model, this model is 71 megabytes, for example. I think the round trip maybe took 9 minutes, something like that. But you'll see it jump really fast there because I cut out from like upload from 25 megabytes to 65 megabytes on the upload. And it's at 99%. Then we wait because the model is in the queue, and you might not be the first one in the queue, but I actually didn't cut anything out there. I'm number 1 in the queue, and away it goes. So it appears, I've done this a number of times, and it appears that the scaling is about right for the amount, the amount of servers on the other end compared to how many users that they have so far, and hopefully they'll just scale up to keep a nice balance there. Now you can either click open at this point and it will just launch it into the editor, or you can hit close and go drag and drop it later. Now I'm in the Autodesk Live editor next. I find the file that was downloaded. Mine is coming here to this folder. I take the file and just drag and drop it. So you can either navigate to it or drag and drop it out of Windows Explorer into that little dish area there. It unpacks the file because it comes down as a package and initializes the scene. And then actually this is pretty close to real time. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 19, 100. Actually, for some reason, it like jumps from, there it is, like there it goes. So I'm not sure what the deal is there, but apparently the first things that were in the model were the hardest for it to process. And then you see these thumbnails. This is the experience you get from the editor. Thumbnails are your projects that you're working on. You can see a couple of tests that I did there. And when I click on it, it kind of transports me to my project, to whatever the home is. Okay, so I'll be showing the sun a little bit more, but it keeps the settings. Like the last time I had worked on this project, I was trying lighting in the morning, for example, and early morning hours, and it was dark out. So it kept that, even though the model has changed compared to the last time that I did it. One of the things I said, you can reorder and delete the viewpoints. So these are the camera views right out of the Revit session, and I think, what did I say, I had like about 8 of them in there plus a 3D view, something like that. I can reorder those so that it's maybe the story that I'd like the owner to experience the building. You know, start in the lobby, then go to the classroom, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's points of view on the side. All right, now one of the biggest things here is publish to Windows. One of the important parts to the editor here is, here's how you make the file that is going to be used by the Autodesk Alive viewer. This is the free thing, right? So there was this package. Now this is a different file format that's used by the viewer to package it up in a different way. Publishing is complete, it says, and then I'm just going to hit close, but you could locate the file if you don't know where your defaults are for where it gets published to. And then I go over to the live viewer. I wanted to show you what that looks like, because ultimately this is kind of like one of those pyramids, if you will, where you pay for the service for the editor, but there might be, you know, 10 stakeholders that need to be able to see the resulting file. And so you can see LVMD, that's the file format for the editor. LIVE is the file format for the viewer. And I drag and drop in the same fashion if that's how you want to do it, or you navigate to it. And we're in the Autodesk Live viewer now with the new project that I just brought down. And if I go click on that one, so this is the experience that you would have in the live free viewer, and or subcontractors and or the owner and stakeholders would have. And this is the same thing that I was in a little bit earlier with a different data set earlier in this presentation here. So there we are, we're inside. Now you see the little markers that kind of look like oval, but pinpoint oval sort of a thing. Those are the viewpoints there. And there are the points of view off to the side that if I click on them, we're jumping from place to place within the model. And I'm going to do some navigation live for you so that you can see a little bit of the experience there. But, you know, generally this is how it works. You pick on a place you'd like to walk to, and it walks you there, and or flies you there if you want to go faster. And you get to a door and pass right through it, sort of a thing. Okay? So that's the workflow that I was talking about. And if we take another look at the slide here, I'm going to go ahead and get out of the video then. If you take another look at the slide, now maybe you'll understand the diagram in the upper right-hand corner just a little bit more readily. You start in Revit. At some point your model progresses to the point where you think it would be helpful to be able to explore it either by yourself or have your owners, you know, and clients explore it, and or as marketing. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a project you're working on. Maybe you're trying to win the next, right? You press that add-in, go live, I believe is what the button said in Revit. It pumps it up to the cloud service if you have a subscription. And which I might add, at this point here in October 2016, that's $30 a month per user. And I noticed in a couple of different slides it said introductory offer, you know, of introductory price of $30 per month or something like that. So who knows if you're listening to this a year later, I don't know, maybe it's less, maybe it's more. Maybe they've changed their whole, who knows, okay, I'm not going to guess, but anyway, right now anyway, you know, I paid $30 and I'm able to do this unlimited. There is a trial up there, by the way, while I'm thinking of this. You can try this for yourself for 30 days and do the trial. Probably the most limiting factor was that I see that it said, and you have 10 times of uploading your model to the cloud service to get a project file out. And I know as I was tweaking it more and more, I did it a lot. So you'll probably burn through those 10 pretty fast, but if you want to, you can get a quick experience of it. It is really easy. I'm pretty blown away. Yeah, okay, I'm blown away by that. It was easy. Wait a minute, my manager's here. I'm not so sure that I want to. Yeah, yeah, it's very difficult. So the project file anyway is created. It's downloaded. I open that up in the Autodesk Alive editor, and I explore it myself, maybe do a little tweaking to it in terms of viewpoints and so on and so forth. And now at some point, if it makes sense that I want to involve other people and have them take a look at it, I do the publish to the live format, so that's L-I-V-E extension, and the Autodesk Live viewer then can work with it as well on Windows or in an iPad. Okay. All right, so this isn't really a class, but I thought, you know, it is kind of simple enough that I could give you a sense for how this works. The style to the left, that's the rendering style I'll change. The top there for presentation mode, I can hide some of the controls. There aren't really that many controls to begin with, but you can hide it a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner. Take up more of your screen that way if you're trying to present to somebody. The views are off to the right and the home's off to the right. I'm not doing it today, and I'm not quite sure how to do that in a webcast anyway, but you'll find a VR, a virtual reality beta button down in the corner. I suppose later on the beta will disappear here, but the idea behind this is that we take this into virtual reality, both for design and exploration, and really experience your model in a more immersive manner. Across the bottom is settings. I'll show you what's under those. The info button that I press to find out information about the door and the walls. I'll experiment with changing the sun position. And I'll go back and forth between orbiting and tap to go, so I can orbit around my model, or I can do the more game-like placement by clicking on the tap to go as we go. So let's go take a look at this. I'm going to use the live editor for this one. Let me find the editor here. That's the viewer. Here's the editor. Let's use that one. Okay, so let me get that points of view out of the way here once. Let's start by orbiting a little bit. Okay, as I orbit around, notice that the massive green field around it and mountains out in the background. Okay, earlier when I was playing the video and had decided to extend to horizon, that's what you're seeing there. Okay, now if you have a Revit terrain that's, you know, a little more complex than what I'm getting at with this one, I just had a flat beneath it and it extended it directly out, you know, and put I had a grass, looked like the dense grass, I think looked the best probably for a match in this, or they're using that. That came across just terrific. If there's terrain in your foreground, you'll see that it'll pick up on that, and then at the edges of the topo surface, it'll jet it out to the horizon like this. You don't like mountains, I can't change that for you. It's going to be mountains. Okay. Next, for orbiting, then I'm just doing a left click and moving my cursor around. If I decide that I want to pan a little bit, I left click and or press on the mouse and I'm panning. So pretty easy to understand. Revit, I've always felt like, is kind of a two-handed sport, because a lot of times you need to have your hand on the shift key to do things, and not so much with this. When I'm walking with the tap to go, I can get there either by coming down to the button at the bottom, or I can just click on the ground where I'd like to go to, and it'll take me down in the tap to go immediately from there. So these little markers that you see in here, those are the camera viewpoints. So if I get over the top of one of those and click on it, it'll take me to where that camera view was back in the Revit session as well. Okay, as I'm walking, there's a cursor Let me just look over at another screen here. I just want to see if you can see the little X that shows up if I pause for a second there. See the little X? That's the place where I'm going to walk to. It kind of backs you up for just a second, then takes you to it, and then stops there. I can push side to side with the cursor to look around from there. Additionally, I might use the arrow keys on the keyboard, and maybe this is from my gaming days. It's been a while since I played games, but you know, the same sort of a thing there. Now, if you have a destination that you like and it's on the other side of glass, I'm going to click right here, and now I'm going to take my hand off of the cursor. There we go. Walks through the doors, goes around the corner, and then comes back to that location. Okay, so it actually is cognizant of what is a collision condition, and you don't have to turn the collision on and off. If I decide that I want to come outside without going around, I just double-click, and it'll take me right through the wall. So it's really pretty forgiving when it comes to that. The shift key will speed me up when I'm walking around. Sometimes the paths that it chooses, you know, I was looking at some of these classrooms off to the right here, and I chose, you know, to go inside the classroom here, and it took me around the outside of the building and cut through the garage to do it. But that was the closest path to get there. It went through one of the doors there as well. Okay. If there's a door, like what we're seeing here, that I get to, it'll just open up. You see how the door disappeared there and allowed me to come through. On the other hand, if I'm working with, say, let me head down to this cafeteria down here. There's two big sliding doors down there that had been added into this project. If I get close enough to it, the doors will just disappear. If I use, now kind of strangely here, you know, like this door right here, for example, maybe I just turn around here once to take a look from the other side and back up. Do you see how the door actually just opened up? So this is just right out of the box. The animation is baked into a number of items here without me having to do anything during the process. If I use, like, let me get a little bit farther back, and then the door eventually will close here. Maybe it's because I have my target still out there. It's thinking maybe it should leave me open. When you're working with this, they have most every door within the Imperial data set of doors from you know, what they would call generic content will open and close for you there. I tried it on a revolving door, and that one didn't work. It just disappeared, and I walked through it, and then it reappeared behind me. So I didn't have to do any extra work there to have that animation happen there. The views that you're seeing off to the side will allow you to transport from place to place. I guess I think it is transport. You know, so if I want to go to this view here, you know, now I'm out there. Now I'm outside the building. Now I'm back to the front view again. So I can jump from place to place really quite readily using the camera views, which are points of view within the model here. Another thing I wanted to show you is what happened with the trees. Let's take a look at them once. And I'll just pause here for a second and see how GoToMeeting does with that. There's a light breeze, apparently, and the leaves are kind of wafting around. Like, would they be wafting, right? Is that a word? I didn't have to do anything there either. They took the trees from my Revit scene and substituted them during the process and put them with a degree of animation on them. Okay, now I did notice that at least here in October 2016 that not all trees will get processed. For example, if I, let's see if I can get this so I can see it a little bit easier here. If I look back at the trees that I used, here let me call up a schedule, a planting schedule here once. And you can just pause this later in the video once it gets put on the internet. At least these trees worked anyway. Some of the trees that I, like conifers for example, the conifers that I had chose, they didn't want to. Let's see if Revit can catch up here. There we go. At least those would work out of the RPC library, the render ready library, right? Those actually got a substitution. Now landscape architects, you're going to be a little disappointed because you know, the Japanese maple really doesn't look like a Japanese maple. You know, and frankly, if you go back to the editor here, a couple of them look like quaking aspen, I think, and I definitely did not drop one of those in. If it, like the conifer, for example, that I dropped in, or a shrub that I dropped in, it just plain didn't, there's nothing there. There's no substitute for it. So I already know that the Autodeskers are working on this to make all that content more content specific to what we're trying to bring across. So some of that will happen more over time. Okay, secondly, let's look, if you look inside the model here once again, another thing you might find of interest is that there's a mechanical MEP file that was a link in the Revit project, and you can see that it came across during the publish. So there was no, I don't know if you're familiar with Navisworks, but in Navisworks we have merging and appending. Merging, you're actually sticking one file inside another. I didn't have to do any of that during the publish process. It took my architectural model, which was my host RVT, and then it looked and it found a you know, the duct and the pipe model, the MEP RVT that was linked into my Revit project, and it automatically took that along and made it part of the model, no extra work. Okay, style, let's see what that's about here once. Let me, maybe I'll back up to the sky here once, get to my controls here behind the GoToMeeting controls. Yeah, I could do it this way, maybe a little easier, so you can see what I'm talking about. So, remember what I was saying, every once in a while you're working on a project and they'll get hung up with the brown brick that you chose. Here within the editor, now you can't change this once you publish this in the viewer. You can't turn around and say, I'd like to see it differently. You have to give them a separate file. I'm set for this style right now. Additionally, if I want to, I can change the style like this. It goes into my Revit project and removes all material references and makes it just a white massing, right? And then I can navigate from there without the distraction, let's just say, of materials, and I can just concentrate on form and function and have that kind of conversation. If the grass and the trees are getting in the way, that's what this one's for. You can strip the color out of that as well and then work with it there, and then turn around and publish it like that if that's how you'd like to work with. So really quite usable from that angle as well. Okay. Info. Let's take a little closer look at the info that I was looking at earlier here. If I go to info, let's see if get my picks. Here we go. You'll see it kind of highlight, like I get over the top of a wall and anything that's the same material shows up. This is an exterior wood panel on metal stud, for example. Revit information about it. Okay, here's some kind of a window or glazing, right? Clear glazing, operable awning. So that kind of Revit information is passed across into the live project as well. Okay, so that's the info part, and that part goes along into the viewer as well, to expose that as well. Settings, I won't get into those, but you can set your travel speed down here. your field of view, and then set the height as well if you want to be looking at a little bit higher up or more of a worm's eye view, for example. You can get down closer to the ground as you're walking. Okay. Let's experiment with sun a little bit here once. Let me head down into the front entrance here once again. And this can work even if you don't have geospecific location back in the Revit project. It'll just use, you know, sun over right shoulder basically, and you can adjust time from there. But this one, I'm set for the June solstice right now at 10:24 a.m. for the location that I had chose in Revit. And you know, if you're wondering what I'm talking about here, it's under this. You've probably done this before, but it's this button right here. You can see where my cursor is. That's the location button. Okay, so once you've picked that location, then you can pick, you know, a time. And so I'll move it kind of slowly so that GoToMeeting can catch up a little bit. The shadow shift, and if you go to enough to the evening, you'll see the lights are already on. I can turn lights on and off with the L key, just where I click them totally off, but it's picking up on my the lighting type from back in Revit and using it there. There's a couple of glitches in there. Maybe if I have a little time before this webcast ends, I'll tell you about what I've done, so you don't have to look me up in the forums to see what I did there to fix some of that as a workaround in the meantime. So say that I choose this time of day, for example, and then back up a little bit here once. You'll see that it puts a, you know, an evening scape on it, which actually is kind of a fun way to explore the building as well, gotta say. All right. Let's head inside here once. These are silhouette people that we're looking at here. If I come in a little bit closer on this, some of you probably now and then use in your projects the entourage folder and use male and female in there, and I did drop in one of them into this project, and maybe I'll just flip around over here. If you use that instead, it gets transferred into something that looks more like this. Instead of the silhouette kind of a person, it's a three-dimensional white figure that comes through during the process. The other thing I wanted to show you too, out of the box, what happens when you get to the stairs? Do you need a gaming engine to be able to go upstairs? So, for example, let me get over here to this room right here, and the door opens up for me. Here's just a regular Revit stairs, like right out of the architectural template, for example. And I can pick on the stairs to go up. I'm just going to press the up arrow key and just start walking forward. Oops. Walk forward here, and up I go up the stairs, and I'm turning. So it just automatically does that for you, which is a beautiful thing. I purposefully did not put a railing on up here. Just wanted you to see what happens when I get to this point. Turn around and make my way over to the lack of railing here and step off. And I drop back down to the floor. So it's kind of like gravity on, if you will. Okay. So I did that kind of cryptic thing I was talking about earlier about the lights here, and what I wanted to tell you what I consider to be a workaround right now. Ultimately, Autodesk is going to have this to where the lights give the same representation as what is in your Revit project. And I don't want to have to tweak with the lights either. I mean, part of what this is about is exploring the quality of lighting within a space. So they'll get this worked out. in the latest dot release that came out, the spotlights are already working better than like big fluorescent lights, right? You know, what they call omnidirectional lights. So right out of the box, what happened to me was all of these rooms off here to the side that had a lot of fluorescent lights here, they were like uber bright. It was almost unusable, and although I could press the L and turn it off, then it was dark, you know, and that's not really what I was after here. So what I did in Revit, because I had a copy of my Revit file so that I didn't have to worry about foot candles or anything like that as far as messing up my, you know, I sure didn't want to mess up my plan. Let me see if I can find let me just go to you know, I know what I can do. I can do it this way. I'll go to the Systems tab, to Lighting Fixture, and anything that was like, say, this light right here, you know, the generic linear fixture, for example, was too bright in my Autodesk Alive scene. I went to Edit Type in the copy, and then I came down to Light Loss Factor, and I pressed this button right here, and I dimmed it. So I just scrolled it back, and you'll find the same dimming that you can do, and then upload it back into the cloud for processing again, and then experiment a little bit until you get it the way you want. Okay, that's pretty much all of the controls and such within in Live that you're seeing there. Now that you have a little bit better experience of what the Live editor looks like, let's take one more look here at the Live viewer. Points of view off to the side. Nothing about scene over here to the left. The same choices at the bottom of the screen here for tap to go and orbit. But if I look around a little bit, the trees are animating. If I come down here, I got people. I don't know if GoToMeeting's helping me out here at all, but people are animated in this. If you look off to the right a little bit, you'll see that the water is rippling. Where did that come from? And actually, maybe you noticed when I first came into the scene, 3 birds came out of the trees and flew out of there. That is not right out of the box with Revit going to Live. What Autodesk is doing here is giving you an option to take it up a notch, okay? If you decide later that you'd like to take it up a notch in Live Design, so Autodesk Live Design, which I said at the beginning of this presentation, it was about a collection of several different products together and services in order to get more done. Autodesk Stingray is another one, right? And this is yet another subscription by the month, kind of a subscription, but it's a gaming engine, right? This is Autodesk gaming engine built specifically for the building design industry, and it can consume from other programs, and the interface looks kind of like what you're seeing there. So, you know, be ready. To me, it looks a little bit like 3ds Max, you know, with the controls, but this has more control than you're going to get with Autodesk Alive. I was, like I said, really impressed with the fact that I could just take a Revit project and, like, in no time flat, I mean, like, really no time flat, I was using it and exploring it in Live Editor. 3ds Max, if you're not familiar with that, this is the tagline from Autodesk there, the go-to modeling and rendering software for 3D design visualization artists. So what 3ds Max does is near photorealistic renderings and cinematic animation, right, is what it's after. So you can create like a path and then walk yourself through it while you create an animation, basically, frame by frame, and then give somebody the AVI or MP4 or whatever the format is, but they're required to stay on that path. But animation can happen, the door can open up, the blinds can open and close, and so on and so forth. That kind of animation, like the birds flying, I imagine, was created here within Max, and then passed, I'll go back up a slide here, passed over into Stingray, the gaming engine, where the birds could fly out of the tree, okay? The shades could open up. Now, granted, Autodesk is trying to make this way easier for us with elements we commonly work with, such as when you get to stairs, you walk up the stairs, so you don't pass through the stairs. You don't have to hit some special button to go up one step at a time. You just walk up the stairs by simply going forward. The doors open and close. The trees animate, things like that. That actually, the ripple on the water, for example, right now if I put in water material in Revit and then bring it in, it's just translucent blue, but it doesn't ripple. But that is, I already know that's where Autodesk is going with it. I saw them posting a comment that this is what they're trying to accomplish with water. So a lot of these kind of things will happen with Autodesk Live right out of the box, even to a greater extent than it is already. But with Stingray, you'll have even more at your disposal. Two different ways you can get content into Stingray. 3ds Max, and I know that there's a number of hits that I had on Maya, which is another Autodesk product, Maya in the Stingray. And so that would, if either of those tools are your tools of choice, then you might find that that's a nice fit for you. An exciting new thing for 3ds Max users with Stingray is that you can make a link between those two programs, and as you make changes to lighting and or geometry within the 3ds Max session, it's automatically updated in your gaming engine, so you can see the result immediately and see if that's what you're after. So so that is a cool next step. If you're wondering how that works with Live, my understanding, I haven't done it yet, but my understanding is that I use Revit to create the Live project, the Autodesk Alive project, LVMD file, right? And then I can just change the extension on it to zip and unzip it in a folder structure that Stingray uses, and that's where the animation comes back in, and then I change the extension back to repackage it up again and reopen it up in Autodesk Alive, and then trees, well, actually I already got the trees, but the birds are flying or the blinds are going up and down, so on and so forth. So with that, I know that Stingray is not what this presentation is about, but I wanted to get you to try and extend just a little bit there.
I think that just about wraps everything up. Thank you very much, Curt. I appreciate your time, and thank you to all of those who attended, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.